Welcome back guys to another video, this time a Valentine's Day special. So I knew going in I wanted to go back and make relief prints because for some reason, like printmaking, I just took the class on a whim and I loved it. I was obsessed with it and I have not touched it since. So I knew I wanted to do something with it, and I was doodling as one does when one is bored, and I ended up with this little thumbnail situation, which was fun, but I wanted to make some changes. And then I ended up doing this. This sketchbook has a lot of other stuff, so pretend you don't see that top bit. So I ended up with this. I really love this. I think it's fun. I think it's like a lot of what my usual like doodles look like when I'm not doing like actual portraits and things like that. I like a lot of swirls. I like a lot of hearts. Sue me. So once I sketched it out, I moved it onto transfer paper. Look, if the transfer paper has space, I'm gonna use it. We're all about using stuff here to the fullest degree. So I did that and then I transferred it onto the block. Super easy. All you really have to do is press it down with something. I pretty much lined it up to the center of the block, and what I like to do is I will use something smooth to press it down. So in this case, I used the little handle of my scissors. So now the real challenge will be carving this. I messed up, guys. Okay, so I forgot the most important thing about making a relief print is do it backwards. Do it backwards, double check. I've honestly just been so used to using transfer paper strictly for paintings that I completely blanked. I forgot. That's my mistake. So now we have it transferred the right way, and you know what, it is a little off because I decided not to use the transfer paper, which obviously my bad. And I just used the actual sketch I did. However, this is just regular paper and you can't see through that. So it's a little off, it's a little closer to the edge than I would like, but I adjusted it a bit and it's fine. It's fine. I'm not gonna redo it again. So now I will start carving this. So for carving, I have a little speedball thing that I bought in a kit like 4 years ago, and it came with 3 different little tips, but because there are a lot of tiny little lines and gaps and whatever, I'm just gonna be using the tiniest one. So this is the tiniest one that came with it. I will be using this for pretty much all of it, except for maybe the bigger blank spaces that I can get away with using some of the bigger bits. But yeah, this will be a challenge. However, pretty much all of the prints that I have done, I have made increasingly small and very detailed, which maybe not recommended, but it's something I do and it's something that I like, so why not? All right, time to carve. So when it comes to carving a lino block, I tend to go pretty slow, partly because I'm working on a very small and usually intricate design, and I don't want to risk carving anything away that I wasn't meant to. I usually start off with like the easier bits first, especially in this case where there's going to be a lot of twists and turns later. It's just a little bit easier to start on the straighter lines or the bigger negative spaces. And you'll see as I'm carving, I tend to turn the block rather than moving my hand as much. I feel like my hand in general is a little shaky sometimes. So by moving the block instead of moving my hand, I find that I get a steadier and cleaner line. I also try to keep in mind how much pressure I'm putting into the cut, because that will make whatever I'm carving a little bit bigger, and the last thing I want to do is carve away something I didn't mean to, especially in those tight spaces between the letters where I really only want like a sliver of the block carved. And in some areas I did end up using an X-Acto knife. The X-Acto knife was great for areas that were a little bit too small. Okay, so small little check-in. I did maybe like 35 minutes, I think. And this is all I have done. Literally just this part right here. Part of it is because there's like a lot of little corners, nooks and crannies. Part of it is I work really slow. Part of it is I'm also using the smallest of the little gauges as possible. It's a lot of things. So I'm gonna finish up the heart and then I'll record some more of the outside carving, or else we're gonna be here forever. And then when it came to doing the smaller areas, I tended to clean off the little tip of that and make sure I got any rubber that might have been stuck there out and aside. I felt like just having a clean gouge just made it easier to get cleaner lines. And again, I'm just turning the block a lot and doing my best to be patient and be mindful of how small I am working and how these tiny spaces can go wrong very quickly. So my number one tip was really just patience. And that was especially true when it came time to carve the letters, which were again very tiny but also had a lot of small shapes and grooves that I had to slowly carve away. Okay, another check-in. It's been, I think, maybe another hour, maybe a little bit more than an hour of carving. I have most of the bottom half done. There's just a lot of tiny little bits, and there were some bits that were so tiny I accidentally carved away too much, and I had to spend a lot of time adjusting that. So it's taking a while. It's a little tragic, but it is what it is, and we are going to power through. And then it was time to see what the print would look like. Of course, it's drawn out, but once you actually have ink on it, it's a little different. So I like using my stamp pad first just to get an idea of how it looks like, if there's anything I want to change or clean up. In this case, I noticed that the lines for the words were a little bit thicker than I wanted them to be. So I just went back in and thinned them out. And then it was time to actually add ink, and this is where it started going a little bit downhill. The ink that I had was ink that came with a small kit that I bought like 2 years ago from Michael's. It wasn't the best thing in the world, and it was coming out very patchy and very light and not the solid black that I was looking for, which was really unfortunate. But still, I kept trying. I wasn't sure if it was the pressure, maybe I wasn't putting down enough, or I wasn't putting down enough ink. But still, it came out a tad bit patchy for my taste. So then I decided another method using a registration, where essentially I would keep the block in the same place and the paper in the same place, and I could do 2 layers of ink instead of 1, and hopefully that would get it darker and to the place I wanted it to be. And it did get darker, just not as dark as I would have liked, honestly. It was still a bit patchy in some areas, and it just really wasn't what I was looking for. But then I decided to try something else out and see if maybe that would help. And very fortunately, it did. Using a mixture of the speedball ink that I already had been using for the other prints, in addition to some yellow screen printing ink, I ended up getting the exact look that I was going for. It was a lot darker, it wasn't patchy, and overall worked really well. Unexpectedly well, as I'm not exactly somebody who's an expert in printmaking, and I wasn't really sure how it was going to turn out. Moment of truth. Literally my real reaction coming up right now. Yeah! Look at how dark that is compared to this. Look at how solid. Alright, so I did quite a bit of printing, as y'all could see. Obviously the first attempts weren't very good. The ink wasn't really showing up, it was kind of patchy. And then I decided to try again today. I came to the conclusion, because I had tried different methods of like pressing it down, or maybe I just wasn't putting enough ink or something, you know. But it just wasn't really clicking. And then I remembered I had this little piece of cardboard, which in printmaking sometimes you have like a registration. I could basically press it down 2 times and do 2 layers of the black, which is how I got this first strip right here darker. And it worked, but it didn't really work quite as well as I had hoped. And then, after coming to the very likely conclusion that it was probably the ink, I remembered I had some of this screen printing ink. So I decided, why not mix it? Because worst case scenario, it's either not gonna work, which the ink already hasn't been working, or it might actually do something. And it did. So I ended up using some of the speedball ink as well, but I mixed in some of the screen printing ink, which is a little bit runnier than the speedball ink, which I think in the end did really help get to a solid color, which is how I got this one. Very nice, very solid. There aren't very many areas of patchiness, so I really do like how that came out. And then I remembered I had some colored paper, so I ended up doing some on this red paper. I didn't quite add enough ink to this, but because it's some red paper, I almost don't mind the patchiness too much. So yeah, it worked out all in the end. It was really fun getting back to block printing. Like I said, I did this once when I took a class on it, which was, I think, almost 2 years ago now. So it's been a really long time, but I love it. It's so different from painting in so many ways, but there's still something very cool about it that I really enjoy. And hopefully, now that I know the ink combination, I can do more of these in the future. But yeah, I hope you guys liked the video. I hope you guys liked seeing me experiment, because let me tell you, I was so ready to give up. I was like, okay, this clearly is not working, but it worked, and that's great. And I will possibly be putting these up as prints in the very near future. I don't know if I showed this one, but this is the solid ink on some white paper. It looks pretty cool on the white too. Thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry for dragging it on so long, but we're done. And happy Valentine's Day.